Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Afra Shemza. I'm a multimedia artist and one of the co-founders of FLUX Events. We're very excited to be here this evening with London Laser for our first collaborative event. And we'd like to thank Heather and the students for their input in tonight's event. And very excited, I'll welcome Maria, who's been curating the event with them later. So I'll just give you just a couple of brief points about FLUX. So FLUX began in 2016. We are an artist-led charitable organisation that was founded by Maria Almena, Oliver Gingrich and myself, and we're all artists. We felt like there was a sort of a gap where multimedia artists, we didn't have anywhere where we could come together, discuss different ideas and kind of create discourse and collaboration in the media arts in London, and so we kind of created this space. We provide different types of events. This year we've been running monthly FLUX socials, and they are for artists to come along and meet each other, network, and present their art to a kind of peer network of people. We run those at the Library Club. We also run curated talks like this one. So the three of us, the co-founders, Oliver, Maria, and myself, we have areas of specialism within the media arts, and we will then curate a talk around our areas of interest, basically. And so this year we've had 3, this being our final one for the year. We've explored themes such as big data and sort of radical ecologies and sustainability within those talks. And tonight we'll be exploring Levitations. Very exciting. We also run exhibitions. So we have an annual exhibition called Art in Flux. This year we collaborated with Lumin, the Royal College of Art, EVA London and the Computer Art Society, and did a fantastic show there called Event 2. So you can find a bit more of information about that on our website. And that was then taken to the V&A this year, which was fantastic. So a small selection went there. So we're open and interested and engaging with media artists. So if you want to get involved, you can do so by signing up to our newsletter and just dropping us an email on info@fluxevents.co.uk. So I will wrap it up and hand over to Maria, who will be introducing this evening's talk. So thanks very much.
I don't think I need, hey, there you go. I don't think I need a mic. Welcome everyone, thank you very much for being here. Welcome to an evening of immersive inquiry, exploring how in times of turbulent changes, contemporary artistic and scientific practices can help us take us into new realities with the intention of transforming ourselves and our society. My name is Maria Almena, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. As Afra said, I'm curator and co-founder of FLUX events, as well as creative director and co-founder of Kimatica Studio. My art practice explore concept of human consciousness and perception, making those transcendental ideas accessible to a modern audience, intending to inspire reconnection with the magical thinking and the spiritual world. I have always believed in the transformative power of art, and I have dedicated my life to this. Always been an artist and have explored many different types of creative mediums. But it was only in recent years that I realized about the intricate relationship between my own personal evolution, therapeutic process, and my artistic work. Once I became conscious of this connection, I started to observe and be more alert of the benefits that this symbiosis was having. And how I decided to create work, my future work, that it will enhance this connection. By focusing my research on this area, I obviously discovered many more artists that have been doing this, that have used their own creative process to, in correlation and in addition to their own therapeutic process. I'm really in love with the work of Louise Bourgeois and Tracy Emin. as an examples of two artists that I've been exploring. Ooh, let me also pass over, actually. Yeah, so taking into account the rise of disease and mental health issues, environmental apocalypses, and political and economic instability, all this current situation made me realize how much, not just myself, but as a society, we need new ways of modern therapies that can help us to address these turbulences, at least to try to resolve it. In this journey, I have also observed a positive movement of artists and scientists addressing these needs, that are trying to create, design, and envision experiences and practices that could potentially help on these challenges. I believe this situation also, in conjunction with the boom of immersive experiences within the creative industry and the rapid technological development, has given us the opportunity, to really address the situation we're living in a really deep way, and it's giving us the tools to do so. So I believe in a personal and global level, we are all searching for help to levitate. So this is where I got the concept of levitation. So I call the evening an exploration on transformative experiences. I refer particularly to the concept of levitation is in the paranormal context, is the raising of a human body on other object into the air by mystical means of meditation. But Buddhists have also related this levitation concept to the concept of being enlightened. From an artistic perspective, I relate this concept to the idea of how a piece of art can enable you to go beyond the limits and how to inspire human transformation. I'm particularly referring to the metaphor of how humans, where humans should be going next. As you know, where we will be levitating, where exactly we will be going, So I'm really into the idea of like kind of multi-dimension realities, and I feel we're in the tipping point of almost like crossing to this new dimension, and that was my inspiration behind of curating these talks. I believe also the art world in collaboration with the science is going to be playing a very crucial role in this stage. And with this evening, I wanted to share different types of creative experiences that are using technology aiming to create a transformative experience in the audience. I will be talking about my own art practice, which is focused in this direction, as well as have invited several artists and scientists that have their own, they're going to share their own vision in this particular subject. And at the end of all the presentations, we will have a panel with Q&A, where we are going to go more in depth about the implications and methodologies of creating transformative experiences. So I would like to play a video. Actually, we didn't rehearse this. transformational experiences represent a deeper sense of commitment to the well-being of each person. And that, I chose this quote because it really resonated with me, the concept of commitment. How, and you know, that it inspired me it made me realize how committed I was to my own well-being, but also to expand as much as I could, you know, this idea of you know, well-being with my art. How could I help people to commit with their well-being? So in 2011, I did my first ever performing piece that it was inspired on shamanic rituals. I feel shamanic rituals had the power of transforming by connecting with the spirit world. And that's something I did experience by myself. So by experience for very first time, this shamanic ritual, it set the precedent of the most transformational experience I've ever had. And it inspired me to try to recreate an experience that could help to recreate this shamanic ritual within a performative context. So it was also the first time I felt this shamanic ritual helped me to connect with my soul, with my subconscious, and I started to observe what the positive impact that this can have, because I feel we live in our Western society. We are not really looking inward so much, and we have forgotten how important it is to be connected with our subconscious, because that holds the key to all our deepest emotions and our deeper dreams. So I did this performing piece by myself, and it was all about trying to encapsulate and embody a fear that I had. It was the first performance and the first art piece that I did after I finished art university. The first time also I combined all my skills into one. And the first time that I used not only the process of making these sculptural pieces, but also the actual performance itself. I use it as a transformative ritual for myself, hoping that also that will inspire others on the process. It was also the first time I used projection, because I wanted to represent this a new layer, new dimensional layer. So. But it wasn't interactive just yet. So in 2012, Nestor Rubio and myself, we founded Kimatica. And thus, I continued in the series of contemporary rituals, but then he helped me to take this idea to the next level by developing an interactive technology that will track the body movement, and it will allow me to being able to improvise on a stage and still have the lighting like coming with me, rather than me having to learn a rigid routine. So that for me was a really game changer in terms of, if I want to create a ritualistic piece, performance piece, it needs to be real. It needs to be, I'm in the moment, I'm creating, and I'm all letting myself go, and every performance piece is slightly different. So that technology allows us to do that. And then we also created another contemporary ritual, we call it Buto, and it was trying to express all these hidden, deep emotions that we are holding. It was inspired on the dance, Japanese dance Buto, and again we were still exploring that projection mapping technology with live sound, with Taka collaborator. He did the live sound for this piece, and we kind of add in more, because then we realized it was important to have this live sound element, like in any other shamanic rituals they would do. This exploration of shamanic rituals, it took me to the concept of trance, how the concept of trance is very important to achieve this, to enter in the subconscious space. So different artists, sometimes they say they get into that space by working in certain ways. In shamanic rituals, they use drumming, the repetition of drumming, to enter into that trance state. But I was particularly intrigued about the transformation through repetition, through dance and mantras. But I decided to focus on the dance trance for the next piece that I've done, that did in collaboration with Diane Harris, Paul Freelander, who is here too, and Steward Holotronica. We did this 2017, I believe, and it was exploring the idea of the ongoing spinning cosmos and how that will relate to the idea of the Sufi dance. When they are constantly rotating, they get to this like transcendental state where they are connecting with God. So I was very fascinated about that idea, and I wanted to have a go. So for this performance piece, it was all kind of improvised. We were all feeding from each other's outputs. Paul Freelander had like some wonderful, strong strobo lights that I'm telling you, after like being spinning, inside those, surrounded by those lighting, and for 15 minutes, it definitely got really, really trippy. And it was an interesting experience, definitely transcendental for myself. And then because we had also the layers of holographic projections that added like kind of new layers of dimensions, and yeah, that was an experiment we did following that concept. Oh, okay. Transcendence. So so that's the project that I was showing the little video clip of. And transcendence is, after I developed all those contemporary rituals, I decided that I felt ready to transform those contemporary rituals into our first multidisciplinary piece. So this is a practice-led research project combining scientific, anthropological, and psychological research with visual arts, interactive technology, and live performance. We are exploring with this piece how to create an immersive experience that will attempt to induce an altered state on its audience. And the idea is that by entering an altered state, you are able to connect with your subconscious. There is other, and I want to explore if with another visual experience you can achieve that. Also researching traditional techniques like hypnosis that they are using already, how to developing a technique that will help the audience to connect with the subconscious and for therapeutic purposes. So we got some more images of transcendence. Here we were combining not only interactive sound, but also interactive different lights, lasers and LEDs and projections. We also had live vocals and live sounds. And it was the first time that we introduced like multi-sensory experience by giving people some chocolates and working with an Ascent artist to really do the journey with the Ascents too. The last project I wanted to talk about is Relax and Release. This is the piece that we created to be directed to the general public, to more the kind of, the mainstream culture, let's say. Because I was starting with my research of like doing a transformative experience. I realized that not everyone is in the same level, and how some people might be ready to go deep in the subconscious straight away and like, heal ancestral trauma. So, but some people, they're not there yet. So I thought one of the things that it could be more valuable for our Western society is reconnection with our body. Because in our society, again, we live in the Western society, it's all about the mind and the intellect, and I feel we have lost connection with the spiritual connection with our physical body. So we created this piece intending to ignite that reconnection. And it's interesting because these have become our most popular art piece. We have taken it like all over the world, and I've always the idea, as I say, is the connecting people with their physical bodies. But I'm always impressed of the power that this piece has about engaging people in the moment, and also to create like collective experiences, which I think is transformative by itself for many people. We've seen like entire groups coming together and being playful, entire families. And you know, it's a very simple installation, but I think what it brings up to, you know, what it offers to the audience is something transcendental, because it helps them to connect with their body in a way that they are not realizing is so transcendental, because it's playful, but it is doing that, really. So we did this for Athens Science Festival, for British Council, with interactive sound for first time ever. And also we've done a few outdoors installations. I guess the most noticeable was we did this summer at Jerusalem Light Festival. We did a projection piece, 50 meters by 12 meters, and we had like thousands of people coming from like really like all over the world. Okay. All over the world, all over the world, and like people, you know, from different ages, different religions, and it was very interesting to see how people, they merged and they really became one when they were in front of the installation. So that, again, I felt, you know, it had a kind of basic level of transformation of like people forgetting their, you know, their barriers on culture barriers or religious barriers. I saw it on the spot, you know, how people, they're just humans and want to connect and kind of play. I think I've run out of time, but I just wanted to quickly mention about how through making all these installations and performing pieces, and by focusing on this research, I think the next natural step in our artistic evolution is to develop an immersive experience where we can combine everything we've been doing. So we are currently researching to do that, and because we haven't done any, I've been researching what other artists have done it, and I wanted to mention Punch Drunk, Virtual Awakening, Jose, and also Marshmallow Laser Fist, the Waldorf Project. Some of the immersive experiences that I've come across lately that they got my attention. So at the moment we are developing a projection floor piece to help a large group to connect in different ways, and we'll be like tracking different data and rewarding interaction, collective interaction. Because as you've noticed in all our pieces, we are talking about transformation, but we are talking about collective transformation. I believe that's going to be the focus of our work with Kimatica, and I believe that's where, you know, one of the things that we are lacking the most, I'd say. And yeah, with Transcendent, we are doing the same, like trying for next year, developing an immersive experience version of the performance we've done so far. But I think I ran out, so I'll just say we'd like to leave you with these two questions that hopefully will solve or at least debate at the panel. How transformative moments can inspire and influence human behavior? Can radical emerging technologies help us to levitate into a better future? That's it.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing your work in sort of transformation and transcendentalism and setting up for this evening. We're going to need to do a little bit of setup while I do a little bit of preamble. So we're going to start tonight, we thought, with a collective transformative experience. So if people want to set up for the next bit, I will, because what we wanted to do is to try and get everybody to levitate to a better future in a lecture theatre at Central St Martin's on a cold Wednesday evening. I think it's doable. Do you think it's doable? So whilst that's happening, and that's in the side thing there, I'm going to introduce Christian whilst he's setting up. Christian Duka is an immersive sound artist working across art forms, and he collaborates across forms, so working with contemporary dance, performance, visual arts, and he's interested in creating multi-sensory 3D audiovisual environments where space becomes an instrument in the hands of the artist. So we've invited Christian to try and turn this room into an instrument for us tonight. So he will be sharing, demonstrating a 360-degree sound experience for us.
I would please ask if you could look at your closed eyelids. So if you could please close your eyes. I'm not really performing, I'm just providing sounds, and the quality of this experience is entirely dependent on you. There's nothing to Instagram, so if you could please turn your phone off or turn them into silence mode, that would be great. Enjoy. Jesus. Thank you very much. I already have it. It's right
You're
here.
okay. Okay, so you
Yeah.
want to say a few
Yeah,
words?
sure.
Is everybody okay? I'll keep hold of this one. Okay. Thank you, Christian.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go and sit down
Sure.
again. So, say a few words.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Duka. I'm a sound artist, lecturer of sound and audio production at SAE Institute, and a researcher. My interest is the relationship between sound and the body. So I'm interested into how we can listen to sound through the body, and how can sound then allow us to become aware of the fact that we do have a body, and become much more heightened. Our awareness becomes much more heightened about how we experience the world through the body. So my interest is very much in line with that of a French philosopher called Maurice Merleau-Ponty, which, to quote him, he said, "The body is in the world as the heart is in the organism." So the sounds that you listen to, some of them were actually playing your ears. So there were some tones there that would resonate inside of your middle ear and will bounce off. These are called autoacoustic emissions. I don't know what the quality of the experience for you was. I fucking love those sounds, but some of you might have found them disturbing, or you might have felt some sense of uneasiness, but that's good. The problem, I think there is a problem in our modern society, which is that in which we are slowly getting disembodied. Maybe that's because of our obsessive connection with the visual sense, the fact that we're always connected with our phones, maybe a tendency to overthinking. I think we're slowly and gradually losing touch with our body. We can see that with the surge of transhumanistic tendencies, of these fantasies of uploading our consciousness to some sort of database. Would you ever do that? Would you ever want to leave your body? I think as human beings, we need to appreciate the fact that we live our life and we are aware of the external world, and we feel the emotions we feel because of the body we have. Everything you do, everything you think about, everything you feel comes from the fact that you have a body. You have senses that sees the world from the outside, hears the world from the outside, smells it, touches it, and tastes it. But you also have senses in the inside of your body, which allow you to tap into how is your internal state like. So I'm interested into how art can get us in touch with our bodies as much as it is possible, and make us more aware of the fact that we do have a body, and allow us to appreciate that and become more aware on how we feel, about how we feel. I think the thing that mostly allowed me to appreciate life was a panic attack I had some time ago. And through that, I actually realized I have all of these senses that allowed me to tap into what's going on. And I became more and more aware of how my body feels. I started to eat much healthier. And I started to see the reactions of my body whenever I was in certain situations. And that's really what you should trust, your body, and how it feels the external world and how it feels its internal world. So this experience, the resonance of your body through the sub-frequencies and whatever twitches you had, or your ears resonating to these autoacoustic emissions, they are the first step to what I call the sonic embodiment. The second one, I believe, is that in which you could use sensor technologies to connect the movements of your body with sound. So I will take part in this residency next year at the Spatial Sound Institute in Budapest, in which I have these sensors that detect position inside of a space. You have these wearable technologies that can connect the movement of your arms or whatever limb to the sound. And I'm interested into what would happen if a group of people, no artists, maybe artists can guide them, but what happens if the audience steps into the room? They start to walk into the room, and as they walk, the sound changes. And all of a sudden, they're like, shit, I'm already in it. Whatever I do is going to be sonified. So there is another person there, he or she moves. How can our relationship be sonified? And how can we interact by means of sound? So it's ultimate non-verbal communication, all connected with sound. And I think that sonic embodiment in that context becomes a metaphor to co-creation, participatory artistic expression. And Maria talks about this therapeutical practices. If there's something I realized is that you can go through a therapeutic experience if you're processing emotions by means of art. You could experience art and process that witnessing it, but we all know that those that will really experience that emotional processing are artists themselves. You all are artists. You might not know your capabilities, but when you're thrown into a situation in which you have to express yourself, you will always try to do your best. You will always try to project your emotions into it. So what if you had the chance to do that? I'm sure you would do that, and whatever unprocessed emotions would be there, they would be processed in the process. That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I don't know about anyone else, but I certainly feel I have a far greater understanding of sonic embodiment after that. We're going to move this and kind of change the tone to a more conventional presentational. So we've got several speakers going to talk about different aspects of embodiment and transformation through technology, through the body. And our first speaker is Becky Steward, who also works with audio, binaural audio, and e-textiles. Becky is lecturer in the Dyson School of Design Engineering at Imperial College London. Comes from a music technology background, and her research centres around body-centric computing. She works with e-textiles and signal processing to build interactive, body-centric, wearable computing systems. And these systems often incorporate performance, fashion, music, and/or design, so another interdisciplinarian, focusing, as I said, on the binaural and e-textiles. So Becky is interested in mediating embodied interactions with wearable computing without relying on screens and gadgets, and she's going to talk about the headlines, the hype, and the real possibilities of smart clothing and wearable technologies tonight. So, thank you very much, Becky. What kind of lighting do you want?
Presentation lights is fine.
Is that fine? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And I think, yeah, and it sounds like my mic's on. So yeah, hello. So I don't really identify as an artist myself. My employer is not one you probably associate with artists. But it is, I'm inside a new school that's just a couple years old at Imperial. That's the Dyson School of Design Engineering. And it's now the new home of the IDE, GID joint master's, MSc, MA with the RCA. So it's kind of, it's a home of creativity that is rooted inside of engineering and kind of working with new technologies and trying to innovate and create new technologies. And so that is what I do. I'm not an artist, but I really like hanging out with them. So this is a quote from kind of one of the godfathers of what is called ubiquitous computing, from some work that he kind of laid out what ubiquitous computing would be. And in it, he talks about things being kind of, technology being woven into interfaces and kind of disappearing and being in the fabric, these very materialistic kinds of connotations of how technology would be interacted with in the future. And instead, what it's really kind of led into is what we think of as IoT. So what we think of as smart fridges, what we think of as Fitbits, these kinds of ideas of cloud computing where actually we've lost the material aspect. It's all about being ephemeral. It's about being things that are not tangible. And so I'm very interested in kind of re-embracing this weaving, this fabric. And I work with these kinds of materials. So these are e-textiles. They're conductive textiles. There's kind of just a collection of them in here. Some of these are fabrics that have metal in them in different ways, so that gives them conductivity. We have threads that have metal in them that give them conductivity. The black ones are conductive with carbon, and so they're black instead of shiny like metal. Keep track of time here. And so these are technologies, these are kinds of items, materials that have been used for quite a while inside of of this kind of e-textile practice, which itself has been largely rooted within the arts and creative expression. So this gets kind of pointed to as the first example of e-textiles being used in a kind of a non-military way. So the military's used this for quite a while and kind of looked into these kind of technologies. But kind of the first major example of this, of using conductive textiles and fibers outside the military complex is from MIT, so really just neighbors to the military complex. And this is some work that came out of the MIT Media Lab in the mid-90s, and this was the Smarkerchief. So this was from one of the researchers, a PhD student, brought in a bit of fabric that was from a wedding dress. And noticed it had metallic threads in it, and that it could be used as an underlying circuit board, essentially. And so made a little audio synthesizer out of it to demonstrate that you could use this fabric as the basis of creating a piece of audio technology. If you enjoy academic reading, that is a paper which you can enjoy some more academic reading, kind of tying together a bit of the history of how music technology and e-textiles have had kind of this, a very intertwined kind of connection to each other. And they don't really sit parallel, they've really quite literally kind of been woven with each other. Then we see e-textile work being brought much more into the mainstream now. So this is some of Google's work. So you might have seen the Project Jacquard jacket, which is collaboration with Levi's that came out a couple years ago. And this is having conductive threads completely woven into the sleeve of a jacket. So then that jacket could be used as like a swipe kind of interface to communicate with your phone or whatnot. And then they have extended it just this past year to a collaboration on a backpack. So you can interact with this backpack, the strap, and have it the same kind of thing, a textile interface that is what interacts directly with your phone. They've been quite upfront, the head of research who's in charge of this project, that they're interested in textile interfaces because they're interested in data and anything that generates data. They would like your data. They would like it to be sent to you, to them, so that they can do what they would like with it to make money off of your data. And so these textile interfaces are not so much that they care about the textile, they just see that this is a way that they could get more data. And this is a way that they would like to be able to, permeate markets and so on. So I'm quite interested in how can these interfaces, how can these new technologies be used for something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more forward-moving than how can we help Google get more of our data and keep more of our data. So just kind of some examples of what's kind of happening in the lab right now. So two of my PhD students I wanted to highlight, who are both located at Queen Mary University of London. One is a student of mine, Sophie Scatch, and she's been working on smart trousers. So looking at trousers that have pressure sensors built right into them to be able to detect kind of your position that you're sitting in, mostly in a seating kind of position around a table for conversation, and using that, combining it with behavior science, cognitive science, to see what are the kinds of postural cues and things that we change about the way we interact with other people. So she's able to, particularly with her seat covers that use the same kind of tech, be able to say who is sitting and who is speaking in a conversation, who's listening, from the way you move and shift around on your chair, and so on. So how can we kind of dig into how we relate to each other as human beings and explore that through these kinds of sensing technologies? Then Anne Liang is working on smart leotards. And so very much, I will only give credit to the curation. So this idea of embodiment of sound, perfectly set up by Christian. So this idea of how do you put sensors on the body to be able to do exactly the kinds of things that he was talking about, of being able to have movement within a room, by a dancer, performer, or by a general audience, without needing to have camera systems, without having watches and gadgets, but have this technology disappear right into the textiles, into the clothing that we're wearing. And so Anne's been working with stretch sensors, which is what all of the stripes are on this leotard, and then to replace having to use these dot systems, which are motion capture systems. So this is a picture from her study where she's comparing the output of her sensors to a motion capture system. So these are the kinds of things that are possible, that are out there, that well, it's in the lab at least, that we're working on right now. So I'm very interested in how do we get this technology out of the lab and into the hands of artists, because I absolutely believe that artists are the ones who can interrogate what this technology is, how it can be used, how it should be used, and to be able to really help reflect on what are these tools that we're making. How do they describe what our human existence is? And that's not something that us as engineers or scientists inside, especially not inside academia, those are not the things that we are set up to do. We need this conversation, this collaboration between these two areas to move this forward. So I think a big part of that, and something especially if you're publicly funded for your research, you have an obligation, I feel I have an obligation to make sure the kinds of things that I develop with my students in my research lab are things that are accessible and can be used and put into practice by people like artists who want to use them in creative contexts. So just an example of a project I did a couple years ago with a whole collection of people. We had a choreographer, someone who's more of a theorist, and a fashion designer, along with dancers. We had a piece called Flutter Stutter, in which we were looking at Internet of Things and data being generated on the body. And this was a dance performance doing live improvisation of dance. Kate Sicchio, who's sitting on the stairs there with a laptop, she was the choreographer, and she does a lot of kind of computer technology mediated live improvisation of dance performances, is her practice that she does. And so she was very interested in how could we have sensors on the body that were completely embedded inside of textile that would be a way that would kind of feed back between two dancers that would then improvise according to the movements going on. So I'm gonna hope this isn't too loud. This was kind of loud before, so I'm gonna just turn it down a little bit. So this was a performance in Brighton a number of years ago. So what's happening there is we have two dancers. They both have a kind of a shoulder piece on that has touch sensors in it, the same kind of technology that's in the Project Jacquard Levi's jacket from Google. And when those sensors are triggered by each other, kind of touching them, it makes a sound to convey that happened to the audience, so they have any idea what's going on. And then each dancer has what we call a tickle motor. So a motor with a ribbon at the end along each neck. And so they were to respond to a movement when they kind of felt the tickle motor. And so that was the kind of the technology and the piece. And so this was some of the things that's inside of it. So we have kind of software that's monitoring the signals being sent back and forth by the dancers. That is the main microcontroller, the sensor, the circuitry that was inside the costume in order to make this together. Then this was a rehearsal with you can see the shoulder piece on. So a difficulty of this project was multifold. One was Arts Council funded, and so there was limited amount of time, limited amount of effort you could put in. It does limit how many times you can iterate and how big you can go, how risky you can be with what you have, because you have a set budget in which to kind of put together a piece like this. And so some of the difficulties of this was actually the mapping between the audio and the sensors, so that embodied sound was something that we didn't have a lot of time to be able to kind of investigate and try to kind of work out the best way. We kind of had to go with the first way that worked because we had a performance to put on. And that this collaboration between the artists and the technologists, so artists also being the fashion designer, the choreographer, the dancers, and then myself, we each had our own tacit knowledge that was not so easy to communicate with each other. And so from this, I've been quite interested in, this was quite an inspiration point for me, of how can we put together kinds of tools that would better enable artists to explore this kind of work on their own terms, to not need a mediator, such as myself, in order to kind of put together ideas, to figure out what is kind of the larger concept that they'd like to do with what sensors and so on. And so I've called this, the project's called Embellished. It's because we're working with a particular kind of, you can think of it like a Raspberry Pi, but a small computer that is called a Bella. So that's the pun in it. So this was the big Bella. when we first started on this, was kind of having this thing that was like the size of a Raspberry Pi and literally putting it on you. So you had the full audio system was completely being worn, and then you could add sensors to it. There's no reason to listen to the audio on this. So this was a workshop trying this out of could we kind of teach people how to use code, how to use sensors, and use this computer in the middle in order to make these mappings and start making kind of creative things. Were we making this accessible? Was it a way that people who came from a textile background could come together and like actually try some ideas out and put things together themselves? So this was from a couple years ago up at Algomec, which is Algorithmic Mechanical Musical Festival, held in Sheffield every couple years. Fantastic. I recommend if you ever have the chance to go to the next one. And so a student who came along very kindly put together this video for us. But we're not going to watch the whole thing. So we moved on from there to a change of materials. So this was kind of got some more funding. We expanded the team out, and we started working with paper instead of textile. As paper is quite it's a material so many different disciplines start from. You sketch out an idea on paper, you write out an idea on paper, you fold up some paper to start making different shapes. And so it was, could we kind of work with the same kind of technology, but changing out the material to see if we could be easier to communicate the technical ideas behind this. And along with that, we held a bunch of workshops with artists and creators and makers across different cities in the UK to ask, what would you do with this kind of technology? So this was someone who would make a wedding kind of cap bonnet that would listen to your conversation, and if you couldn't think of anything interesting to say, it would whisper in your ear a new conversational topic. So there was varying degrees of how kind of realistic we could implement some of these ideas. But what we ended up putting together was a system that would let you connect kind of paper circuitry, things you could cut and put together very quickly, along with audio as the main output using this little computer board together. And then a key part of it was to have tutorials and explanations that felt a bit more accessible, not like a circuit diagram, not super engineering, and I mean that in a very derogative way. But how you could put this together so it felt approachable. And so in particular, I really loved that it was suggested by one of the research assistants to kind of make, on the project, to make these kind of animated GIFs. And then May, who was a student on the project, she really ran with it. So I really loved it, to kind of explain very quickly, visually, what is the kind of thing you could do with this kind of sensor? How could you use the information generated off of this kind of thing? It could detect this kind of motion. So this actually does have sound up play. So this was kind of the output of some work. A couple-day workshop with that. With someone who hadn't done a lot of coding before, but combined together, he was a musician who combined together kind of different sensors and worked with the code examples and edited them that we had, and this was his output.
We should play something so you have an idea about what we did
So that is, he put together the kind of bass sound. It sounded like a string being plucked. He had coded that up, that he would pluck the string. When he twisted his arm, it would change the pitch of the string. It would go lower or higher. And he was able to put that together kind of with these tools we had kind of shown him how to use. And so we, since then, have moved on to also looking at textiles and having textile sensing be kind of an additional material you could work with. So you could start with paper and then move into textile, in particular for those who do come from a textile expertise and a textile kind of training. So I just want to point out a couple resources. So if you're interested in any of the kinds of things, so we're working with Pure Data. So in particular, there's a lot of Pure Data patches and a lot of things that help give you examples of how you would work with Pure Data, which is a free open source program in order to make audio. If you want to start working with interactive audio, it's a really good tool to start with. And then in particular, we talk about we show how you can work with the Bella platform. So if you want to start having sensors and have live inputs into making that audio. And then also the bottom one, the tiny letter link. That is to sign up for, I don't know if you know Tiny Letters, they're little newsletter type things made by MailChimp. And that is if you are interested in kind of taking part in a workshop. So constantly my students and I are, because we want to get our work out into the world with other people, particularly with people who want to do creative things with this kind of technology, we very regularly, as part of our research, is we hold workshops where we want to try out new things with you guys and say, hey, here's some sensors we've made, here's some tutorials we made. Do they work? Is this good? Is the kind of general research question, is this good? And so if you're interested in those kinds of things, particularly if you're interested from a textile standpoint, if you come from some kind of textile expertise, then if you sign up just there to the tiny letter, it won't be more than like once a month I ever send an email. But that's just a way to stay in touch if you're interested in kind of being involved in that part of the research. And so that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. That's great. And I know already there's going to be a queue of my students making a note of those contacts and getting in touch with you. Yes, you know who I mean. Okay, fantastic. We're going to save your questions because we're going to do the speakers back to back and then have everybody up at the end for a panel discussion. So please hold on to questions and comments that you have for Becky until then. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Ari Peralta. Where are you, Ari?
Right here.
There you are. Okay. So Ari leads the dynamic research consultancy of Origami, a Forbes recognized serial entrepreneur. Ari has been on a mission to unite various fields of science involving the human senses and facilitate the bridge between innovation initiatives, sensory delivery technologies, and design function. So he's an advocate for science, technology, and art, working alongside scientists, economists, behaviorists, researchers, industry executives, and policy advisors as well, promoting well-being, wellness-led human ecosystems. So tonight he's going to talk about the science of happiness, exploring human-centered design from the inside out. So please, a warm welcome to Ari.
Cheers, thank you. So thank you for having us here. Thank you, Art and Flux, CSM, and London Laser for curating and creating environments and platforms where we can bring art, science, and tech together. I want to start with a question. And just by a show of hands, who is happy? Okay. And Maria, why are you happy today?
Because I was saying I'm happy some days, you know, not always. Today I'm happy because I'm alive, first of all, and because I'm doing what I love doing.
Great. So that is what I want to explore today. I want to start defining what makes us happy. Is it the same? And can we create something that we can all agree on happiness? But before we do that, I want to share something that makes me happy. I want to take a selfie with you guys. I'm going to jump up here and see if you guys can get a little closer. So I need everyone just to scoot a little bit. Let's see if we got it.
Do you want people to stand up and move?
Let's see what we can do. I think we have somewhat. Yeah, we can turn that light down. See, and this is why it's important, right? There we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now you know what makes me happy, right? So, you know, we have the unique ability and really privilege to work with scientists, with technologists, with designers, trying to bridge the gap between theory and practice. What does that even mean? It means that we're all talking a lot about science, about the senses, about sadness, about achieving human potential, and even happiness. Yet somehow in this era that we live, we are more anxious than ever. We live longer than we did before. We make more than we ever have before. We have more things, yet somehow we seem to be unhappy. So I wanted to dive and research, not just from one perspective, but from many perspectives. I'm sure you've seen memes, if you will, when it's multiple perception memes, and I think this is playing again. So, but this idea that there is no one answer to happiness is what I'm leading towards. And I really want to express to you today the importance the senses play in everything, in particular in reality, where happiness sits. Wanted to take another moment and thank a dear friend who's here, a leader in pioneer in functional music, Mr. Tom Middleton, who's in the back somewhere. Tom, if you can say hello, there you go. It's courageous individuals like him and Maria and others who are artists and have really developed these new networks of showcasing art, yet they're coming to us, coming to other scientists, coming to other research groups, saying, how can we be effective? How can we be more effective? How can we be better, and how can we do better? So I'm sure you've seen these kinds of memes online in terms of different perception. So I created one in terms of happiness. And let's see if you agree a little bit so far. What most people in our friendship circles think today that happiness is somehow revolves around social media. What our moms think, at least mine, is grandchildren and babies everywhere. Typically, anything that makes me happy is around the ocean. I'm from the Dominican Republic, so you can't blame me. Society, this really seems to be the idea or visual of happiness. But what I want to get to is, again, what is happiness? So because science is as convoluted as everything else, I wanted to see if we can break down across different fields of science, different perspectives of science, can we get closer to an answer? Surveys indicate, both here in Britain and also in the US, that we are pretty much just as happy as we were in the 1950s. A lot has happened since the 1950s. Why aren't we happier? Can we be happier? Happiness changes across our lives, and that's okay. This idea that money makes us happy has also been debunked by every single research study that we've done. In fact, here's a fun fact, and it's that we're actually happier when we give things away, in particular money, than when we receive. These are all food for thought, because at the end of this, I really want to see if we can define happiness. What we got from all the experts is really a breakdown. 3 different ways we can look at happiness, at least through the lens of science. Happiness are chemicals, happiness is a state of mind or an emotion, and happiness is behavioral. So for each one of these, I wanted to explore a field of science who has a bit more answers. On the chemical end, we're going to jump into neuroscience. On the emotional end, we're going to jump into psychology. And on the behavioral aspect, we're going to go into evolutionary biology. So on the neuroscience end, it's all about chemicals, right? When we're talking about neuroscience, we're talking about the science and study of the brain, the chemical interactions, the electrical impulses. I'm sure you've heard this before, but all of these things in the background are neurons. That is how we communicate inside our brain. And our senses provide context to the reality in which we live. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins might not mean a lot on this slide, but maybe the next slide can help us illustrate a little bit better. So with dopamine, we have the reward neurotransmitter. Up there is oxytocin, the love hormone. Up there we have endorphins, calm. And then we have serotonin, which is our will to do something. This is chemically happiness. So it's a bit confusing when we think that only one thing is happiness. The way we currently approach happiness or depression through pharmaceuticals is typically focusing on serotonin. So it's going to be interesting, the more that we understand neuroscience, the more that we explore and have a better grasp at how our brain functions, the better we're going to be able to answer these things. I wanted to bring up just one simple fact on the advancements of our brain, our knowledge of our brain, and neuroscience in general. Even though we're talking a lot about AI and artificial intelligence, obviously the same thing, we have only mapped the brain of one living being. And it's a worm the size of your hair with 300 neurons, not 90 million. So we have a long way to go before we fully understand these things. But for the most part, these are the 4 main chemicals involved with this elusive formula of what we call happiness. From a psychological perspective, we're really talking about our emotions and our moods. And here, what most psychologists have agreed with is that happiness is internal. It does not depend on external stimuli. Okay, so we have chemicals on the neuroscience end. We have this appreciation or awareness of consciousness within the psychological end. This is something created. It's called the Atlas of Emotions. This was, minus the smiley that's spinning, was created by the amazing Dr. Paul Ekman together with the Dalai Lama. Dr. Ekman is based in Stanford. I've had the chance of meeting him, an incredible person who dedicated many, many, many years trying to understand emotions, and thanks to him, we have facial recognition. So he developed and wrote a book and did extensive research across most countries in the world, understanding microexpressions and really creating a connotation or correlation to emotions. As you can see, emotions are almost like spheres, right? Nothing's linear when it comes to the human mind. And as you can see, it's only one that's actually positive, according to what we would call positivity. It's surrounded around disgust, around anger, sadness, and fear, and somewhere there is enjoyment. There's something here to this. Have you ever noticed that we're always more keen to talking about a bad restaurant experience versus a positive one? I think it's just because it's easier. It feels better. How can we change that? How can we make that large yet siloed component of enjoyment and filter it across the different silent modes of what we're doing? The idea of how we perceive or interact with a moment that makes us unhappy is quite complicated, and there's layers to it. But from a social perspective, this is how Dr. Ekman and his team have visualized it. From a biological standpoint, though, we have a lot more answers. And it's that, once again, this message is repeated, it is not external, it is internal. So on an evolutionary biological journey that we're about to go on, I'm going to help explain through an illustration how we got to the brain we have today and how we got to happiness. By the way, interesting fact, every single one of us has a different biochemical predisposition to happiness. And it's not in reference to can you be happy or can you not, but it's more in reference to range. And as of 2019, as of today, we still do not know one thing or have come in contact with any sensory combination that can extend our range of happiness. So let's look at our brain. We evolved, right? But where did all this start? It actually started back in the caveman days. So I have a little lovely characters here, some caveman friends. Hello guys, how are you? So we're gonna illustrate now how that happened. Nature was there. And we had flight or fight response. We had to understand how to survive all these different elements. And that is why our brain is based more on stress, so that we can avoid things that would hurt us or harm us and remember those things. So that is how our brain evolved, out of being always alert and not wanting to be in that situation the other person was, or the other cave person was. In this case, our brain has evolved from every animal that we know, from reptiles to mammals to us as intelligent beings. The idea that our brain has evolved, but the idea that we still interact in the same way, those are the things that we have to now start combining and defining. Our brain was used to identifying things that could hurt us. And that's probably why we look at our boss that way, or we look at professors or teachers that way. It's this idea of being caught. It's this idea of being ready or not ready, and how our brain prepares us for it. Ultimately, this idea of being able to be conscious and remember these bad experiences is only to serve us one purpose, not do it again. Yet somehow in modern times, we're stressing, we're thinking about what we did wrong, we spilled something on someone, oh my God. Yeah, it gets bad. And she takes a selfie of it, and it just, yeah, picture, horrible. But anyways, this idea of happiness and this idea of collectivity is something that is archaic in our minds, archaic in our DNA. We're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to survive alone. We're meant to be in groups. Yet somehow that is not how we are living our lives today. And despite all the technology and all that we are talking about in terms of semantics with connectivity, we're only talking about connectivity because this connects to something. But are we really more connected or not? We have the ability at the intersection of art, science, and technology to redefine these things. Art, science, and tech have now evolved in silo, But when we really talk about creating human impact, it's about how do we use the advancements in research and science to improve our lives? How do we use art to express those improvements? And how do we use technology as the instrument to deliver them? A very interesting study from Professor Dunbar, based in Oxford. We have a biological limit or threshold to the actual engagement and interactions we can have with other human beings. This is something that started with evolutionary biology on chimpanzees and primates. And us being a form of primate, we have our limitations too. Baboons can only interact with up to 30 to 40 more baboons. Our magic number is 150. And that's just a max number. When you start breaking that into layers, there's only so many people you can interact to have meaningful relationships. This is from the 80s. I grew up in the 80s, and we had a toy called Stretch Armstrong. And it was just stretch and stretch and stretch. This is what we are doing, not with our attention span, but with our biological ability to connect with people. We have a huge responsibility with how we use technology, with how we use different sensory stimuli, because we know that it can affect us both positive and negative. And while some people are different, this idea of resting happiness, which is kind of like your threshold of happiness, and this idea of range are two separate ways of looking at happiness. So happiness is complicated. It's quite complex. It's not a simple answer. But we understand that and we know that. So what we need to do to improve where we're at is removing the gimmicks, the pseudoscience, the watered-down science, and again, creating bridges where we can interact, where we can share and we can transfer. These are some really tidbits that I wanted to take and pass on to you because it's something that comes up across every single field of research that we do. Happiness is in purpose, and I know you've heard that before, but when we are living comfortably, when you're at standard, what makes you happy then? You need to find these answers out. And it was actually quite introspective and therapeutic doing this presentation because I've been asking myself these questions for the last week, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Community. Community is also part of happiness. It's human interaction, human connection. Besides the fact that you see here with the kids in Brazil and in Mexico being the happiest because of their collective family-based environments, we consistently see that the people that live the longest and happiest tend to be somewhere in the Mediterranean. I don't blame them because it's beautiful. But some islands like Crete and Sardinia, it's literally because they are interacting and having meaningful relationships that accumulate over the years. Self-discovery. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for seeking a truer, greater answer for what I could be. And it's that journey of self-discovery that will always lead you to happiness because it's not a linear form. Most people who go through extended amount of times in pain or suffering or unhappiness, they actually end up being very happy. And we can prove that in research as well. Finally, this idea of curiosity, which is why we're all here. Curiosity is definitely my most important one after self-discovery. It's this idea that you don't know it all, and because of that, you want to continue to seek more answers. There's a beauty that happens when we exchange with scientists, with technologists, and with artists. And the beauty of that exchange is that scientists, everyone has their regimens, their processes. With artists, they love their freedom. With technologists, they just speak another language. But when you bring them together, it's how to transfer these skills. And I think the answers to a lot of the complex problems that we face today, be it our environment, be it our anxiety, be it our connectivity issues, all those solutions aren't going to be single-handed solutions. They're going to be complex solutions that are going to need to be involved, that you are going to need to be involved with together with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ari. And save questions and comments for Ari, or if you have definitions of happiness yourselves to share with him afterwards. We have one more speaker this evening. I'm going to introduce Dr. Annahita Nezami. We're going to take a distant view now because Annahita is founder of the VR Overview Effect. It's a professional psychological service offering bespoke therapeutic workshops which incorporate virtual reality earth-gazing experiences. So Annahita is a counselling psychologist with over 14 years' experience of working in mental health, and the project is inspired by her doctoral research on the therapeutic value of the overview effect. She's passionate about bringing the cognitive shift experienced by astronauts when viewing and earth-gazing to a wider audience. So over to you, Annahita. Welcome.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs and voices never shared, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence.
Okay, thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Annahita Nezami. I'm a counselling psychologist and I work in Kingston. I have a private practice. I am fascinated by earth gazing from space, and that's where my research, my doctoral research, started, with this fascination of what the astronauts experience when they see planet Earth and the feelings that they have and what that experience is like. But before we go into my fascination and my research, I just want to talk a little bit about society as a whole. I work with individuals, and sometimes my feeling is that actually at times the problem is bigger, and there is a system that is perpetuating mental health problems. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, which on the slide it says, capitalism churning people and nature into capital, and therefore increasing or contributing to mental health problems. And as part of capitalism thinking and consumerist society, we're often, and the ego growth and development, we kind of can fall into jealousy and greed, ruthless competition, intolerance, materialism, power and self-importance, resentment, and overthinking, which is something very much that I see daily. The thoughts getting out of control, and people coming to me with intrusive thoughts, obsessive thoughts that are just, really, really difficult to manage. And so this sort of the shackles of modern life, which can be something that capitalist society can, I think, increase. So, of course, it's inevitable that we all need to escape the ego. Most of us think, and we all need times to escape that. So escapism doesn't have to be an unhealthy thing. However, it can be unhealthy, and that's when it kind of falls into the category of avoidance. And of course, if you think about, I don't know, in the 18th and 19th century, the opium dens, for example, and you used to have, people going there just to sort of get away from society. And in more modern day, we have obviously addiction to gaming, we have addiction to pornography, we have addiction to sex, which is a different type of escapism, but also, of course, drugs as well. And that is a form of escapism which is avoiding. And often when we fall into that type of escapism, we are avoiding ourselves, we're running away from something, and that is how we can fall into the traps of escaping in an unhealthy way. Of course, there are healthy ways of escaping the ego or our thoughts. And, it could be dancing, it could be reading for some of us. Extreme sports is a big way of people, escaping the ego and kind of rising above themselves and reaching a higher state, if you like. Of course, meditation is a way we escape ourselves as well, but it's mostly in a healthy way. So with looking at healthy escapism, my doctoral research was very much focused on this sense of oceanic oneness, which is a way that we can escape ourselves and reaching a higher state of consciousness, perhaps through meditation and perhaps extreme sports. And I was very much focused, in fact, I was focused on near-death experiences at first, but I found it very hard to find participants. So, then I kind of moved on to other experiences, and there was extreme sports, and then astronauts who have this kind of oceanic feeling or this sense of oneness when they're seeing planet Earth from space. And I sort of reached out, and actually the astronauts were the ones that thankfully got back to me. So I was very pleased about that and very excited. It was back in 2012. So the astronauts got back in touch with me, and so I decided to do my doctoral research on something called the overview effect, but also on the therapeutic value of the overview effect. Now, the overview effect is a cognitive shift in awareness reported by many astronauts, and it happens during space flight and often while viewing Earth from space. And it basically is astronauts seeing firsthand planet Earth from space and feeling profoundly taken back by this view, experiencing awe and the sense of interconnection with life before them. And this renewed sense of responsibility to take care of planet Earth. And this idea of oceanic oneness really relates to the overview effect. And Freud, Sigmund Freud, was the person that coined the term oceanic oneness. So studies suggest that missions to space and space-like environments on Earth can provide long-term psychological benefits. And so my doctoral research wanted to look into a key part of that, which is Earth gazing, and to see what benefits that could give. What healing properties did that experience have for the astronauts, and how can we convert that back down on Earth for individual therapy, for community therapy, perhaps in education system? How can we convert that back and let more people access that aversion of that experience? So I completed my research. Basically, it was thematic research. So I interviewed some astronauts, and they sort of told me about their specific experience of Earth gazing. However, of course, it's all very interconnected, and we talked about other aspects of their experience as well. And really, there were some elements to the experience that was different to, just feeling awe or feeling a shift in emotions. It was much more complex than that, and it's much more multifaceted than that. So that's what I learned. But I think the things that they defined was that they gained a familiarity with planet Earth. They went around her and they really got to know all of her facets, and they really got to know her faces, and they got to know every part of her. they also said that, you know, at times it was quite an uncomfortable feeling looking back down on Earth and really looking, it's like a mirror, and looking back at sort of what we had caused, all of the harm that we had created. So there was a cognitive dissonance that was created. So I'll go into that part a little bit more in a second. But as I was talking, there are aspects of spaceflight experience. Of course, there's weightlessness that many people would think, well, that's going to be beneficial. You know, being weightless, long term, of course, that's got some negative effects. But of course, feeling weightless must have some sort of therapeutic benefit. But actually, over time, that sort of passes by, and that becomes the norm. And so, yes, but actually, over time, it's not that abnormal to be weightless when you're sort of up there for 90 days, or you get used to it. But Earth gazing and actually looking the other way back at this sort of infinite space is something that remains outstanding and awe-inducing, and remains a powerful experience for the astronauts. Of course, the other things that leave a mark on the astronauts are the thrill of the rocket launch, separation, escapism. Actually physically being separated from Earth is a big thing. And this feeling of unity and oneness and comradeship, you know, that when they have this experience and no one else has had, that they have shared it together, this sense of shared experience. So, it's too small there. So what are the psychological mechanisms that promote cognitive shift? So I was really interested in trying to understand how, because there's a shift in the astronauts when they return back down to Earth. You know, these are people that, you know, are engineers that are going there, they're quite technical. And when they come back down to Earth, there is this real shift of wanting to help, and sort of, it's a strengthening, I think, of attitudes more than a complete change. But they all felt different, you know. The people that I interviewed, and certainly the reports that I read before in other journals suggest that. So really what creates this shift? And I was really thinking about the therapeutic experience. You know, the therapeutic experience isn't just about creating happiness. It's not just about, you know, if you want to change people, it's about creating conflict in a sense, and creating a cognitive dissonance sometimes that allows that shift, that allows that reflection in people. So similarly with the music that was playing, you kind of need to have that in therapy sometimes. And so therefore, the cognitive dissonance that's created when the astronauts see planet Earth, see human civilization, the damage that's done, they look at the fate of our planet head on, you know, they look at thunderstorms and the eye of the storms, and then look right at it. I think the fear is a big part of it. Although they never directly talked about fear, they always would go around it. It's more of an existential fear that they wouldn't directly talk about. But they did mention that they felt uncomfortable with this cognitive dissonance. So really creating this right balance between stress and positive emotions and stimulating you whilst making you relax is very important in the experience and in that shift that occurs in the astronauts. And of course, there's this sort of enchantment with what they're looking at. They don't have much time to just Earth gaze. They're always doing tasks. They're always busy. But in that moment of Earth gazing, time passes them by very quickly. They're very fixed and fixated on what the view is in front of them. Although they're not completing an activity, and flow is often related to completing an activity, they are transfixed on the view in front of them. And their notion of time changes in that moment as well. And of course, the experience is all about positive psychology. It induces positive emotions, and the endocrine system, so all the emotions that the speakers before me were talking about, that's going to be induced as well. So, you know, the internal system is taking a hit of these chemicals as well. So, and in terms of applying that experience, and for me, I'm wanting to apply it perhaps through virtual reality. Well, if you think about depression, and depression is basically connected to something in our brains called the negative feedback loop. If you think about depression as being stuck in that loop, you know, you're kind of circulating around in that loop. There's these parts in the brain. So if you think about types of therapy, you know, there's electroshock therapy in some places. It's still happening. And if you think about even, antidepressants, and we're kind of trying to interfere not just with the serotonin levels, but we're also trying to interfere with that negative feedback loop, which is in depression. So shock therapy, in whatever way you like to think, even with psychedelics, they're now using psychedelics in clinical trials in States, UK, and in Netherlands, but it's about shocking that feedback loop. So of course, experiences like this, or inducing experiences in one way or another, if you can have them firsthand, amazing. If not, through virtual reality, I believe can also shock that negative feedback loop, particularly if it's part of a therapeutic experience. And talking about happiness, I think these kind of awe-inducing experiences are linked to something called eudaimonic well-being. Now, there's hedonistic well-being. We talked about well-being earlier. Hedonistic well-being is about immediate gratification, happiness now, I want it now. And of course, the consumerist society in many ways condones that and promotes that. So we are all after that in a way. There's too much choice, and in a sense, that's getting us in a lot of trouble with our mental health. People are confused, people don't know what to have, they're constantly changing their mind, and it's creating distress. Actually, what we're finding through research, that instant kind of gratification, it doesn't actually last very long, and it's another form of addiction. You're constantly chasing your tail to get it. What has more meaning is something called eudaimonic well-being, which is about purpose, it's about benevolence, it's about giving back, it's about thinking about the bigger picture. And so what we're trying to do with our work here and other people, like all of the wonderful people that spoke before me, I suppose we're trying to induce this sense of eudaimonic well-being in people to allow them to connect with that inner subjective happiness, which is about those things. And our project is really focused on that side of well-being, although I think there is some overlap with the hedonistic side as well, with some of the emotions that come up. So our project is called VROE, and it's based on my research, but also collaboration with lots of wonderful people, and my project started in 2012. I've been working with it with my colleagues since then. So it's a long time coming. We've put a lot of thought into it. It's based on a lot of reflection. So what we're using at the moment, we're just about to have our pilot ready, hopefully by the end of January, our pilot program, which then we're going to be touring with and going in America, Europe, as well as the UK, to get feedback, to get some data, yes, but also necessary data, because of course what we want to do is make sure it's safe when we do apply it to perhaps more vulnerable people and groups. We're going to have it as part of short-term workshops to help internalize the process, the experience. It will involve also meditation, a meditative virtual reality experience of earth gazing with biofeedback and music. So for who, we're thinking about prisoners in the long term. This is once we've got our research, once we understand if we can use it. And of course, there's lots of red tape in getting into some of these areas. But with prisoners, potentially with the corporate world, workforce, palliative care, it's where my dream started in terms of end-of-life care, palliative care. There's people just, really withering away on their beds without anything. And we've had some positive feedback with virtual reality in palliative care. So we're looking at that. Hard to reach groups, knife crime, terrorism, schools, performance to enhance performance, and potentially mood disorders. And of course, all of these are works in progress. Some of these we're looking into in 2020 to just go and do some research with. And that's it.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. I would love to experience the overview effect in VR. Can it be a kind of, can other people do it too?
Yeah, are you asking me that? Yeah.
But, what we'll do is, we've got 11 minutes. We're going to finish at 9:15, and then we're going to invite you to continue conversations in the bar. The platform theatre bar is open until 10. So we're going to just take 10 minutes, which isn't adequate at all, to question these wonderful speakers, but maybe we can just get a little bit of conversation for the last 10 minutes. So Maria, over to you, and if the other speakers, if everybody could come up.
Yes, if everyone would like to come sit here. Well, first of all, thank you very much for such an inspirational talks. I think you gave me a lot to think about in terms of transformational experiences, and you know how the different angles that you can look at transformation experience from. And I think maybe I'm going to make 2 questions and then I'm going to open it to everyone, because I had a list of questions, but I don't think we're going to have time for all of it. But just now, taking into account your background and you know your research, I would like to hear from your own words, like what it is, you know, a transformative experience for you, and just because you know researching this theme is again it's a complicated, you know, a question to answer, and I know everyone has, you know, is something that is personal, subjective to each of us, but then also we got some backup from our own research and you know, seeing people's reactions and impact. So I think that's going to be my first question. Who wants to go first?
I had quite an experience about that. It was a piece I directed in October 2018. The 21st was the best day of my life, actually. It was this piece called You Are Human Presence. It was a combination of immersive sound, performance art, contemporary dance, and audience participation. There was my sister there. She's never really experienced anything that I've done, none of those weird stuff I was doing. But she came and she cried at the end of it. And I was like, what did you cry? And she was, well, there wasn't really an objective sense of what was going on. The piece was all modeled about symbolism. And it came from my research about a dream and dream logic and how we can put dream logic into living experiences. And she was like, there wasn't any objective sense that I could grasp rationally, so I had to project my inner state into it and try to make sense of it within myself. I'm quoting her word by word. So I think what was really crucial there was about activating that unconscious emotional processing, but that is really activated through introducing symbolism and things that you can only, the symbols that have to do with, you know, there was this performance artist, she had this layer of latex that she would tear off. And that's very symbolic, is tearing off your skin. That's something that our unconscious processes and sees that, and it's very open to interpretation. So I think in a way it's what makes an experience transformative is very much dependent on how free are you to interpret it and how much room is there for personal interpretation, which I think is connected with what John Cage called the militarization of language, he said, but I transformed that into the militarization of art. So you're not bombarded by stuff you need to get. You don't need to read the press release to get the piece of art. You're there, and actually the piece of art ends with your interpretation. So leaving that room of interpretation open, playing with symbolisms that are very open to interpretations, I think it's key. And actually the dreaming experience is the only experience we have every day that is about that. We have researches that is been done for almost 50 years, especially by one researcher called Rosalind Cartwright, which is looking at the fact that in dreams we do process our emotions. Actually, while we dream, we meet our inner psychologist. And I don't know if you can confirm that. So my inspiration was, what is about that dreaming experience that it has that potential for emotional processing and transformative experience? So that's my 2 pence on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Great points.
yeah, it's a really fascinating point. And for me, transformation, personally, but also in what I see in other people, can sometimes come from darkness and from trauma. You know, I've seen great growth happen from that place. You know, and so in many ways, that can create transformation. And again, in darkness, in not only physical darkness, but in emotional places of darkness. People can find and touch base with untapped energy. And if that energy can be translated into something else, directed into something which, I always think we're collectors of traumas in one way or another. So, so if we can direct that energy somewhere other than self, so if it's anger, for example, then that can be a powerful source of change and growth and create. So for me personally, but also, yes, dreams in terms of this processing going on in the dream world of the emotional interactions during the waking world, and that intersection is,
I think transformation is something that we can all relate to. And when we're describing what comes out of transformation, it's growth. And that only happens through friction, through hardship, and through questioning everything that you know. And at least for my journey, my personal journey did not begin with any of this, with the senses, but it was something that revealed itself. And I think that's an important factor for those of us who are in a place or state of mind where we don't have all the answers. I hate to tell you, you never will, and that's okay. And seeking more answers, just like with science, you'll find more questions versus answers, but somehow that piece is all together. And I think right now, all of us are trying to do our best to mix things where there's barriers. And when we're talking about barriers of innovation, it's not that we as a society don't have great ideas, but I think as many of us have pointed out, where these ideas stem from, whether it's business, whether it's academia, whether it's nonprofits, they seem to not get implemented into the world. And I think that's why we're all here.
Would you like to add anything else?
No, I feel like in time we'll go into the second question. I think otherwise we'll...
Actually, I was going to open before, just in case there is some burning questions. Yeah. All right. So we got two.
Yeah, how many?
We got two so far. So
Do you want to take two?
yeah, let's take two, and then. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you for all the panelists. Very grateful for being in presence of your work and this community as well, because we're all in this together. But my main concern is that we're mainly focusing on the transformation of consciousness and not in the integration of consciousness, because it seems to me that the more we transform ourselves without a process of integration, there seems to be more fragmentation. We tend to see this in the psychedelic community as well. Peak experience after another peak experience, but without bringing it together, it just becomes more fragmented. So my question to the panelists would be, how would you consider integration within your artistic process?
Hold that question, we'll take the other one and then you can do yours.
Okay.
I'll echo what he said. It's been a wonderful talk. Thank you for your various perspectives on things and the work you've done. I was just wondering, I mean, I guess this is more to the latter two talks, because you kind of open it up into the real big picture stuff, and particularly when we're talking about viewing Earth from outside and seeing things from a different perspective. I think that, there's some stuff that we need to learn soon about how we transform the way we see our life and the way we see the systems that we create for ourselves, especially if AI comes along and basically makes human endeavor redundant from a production standpoint, and we've got to find a way to find meaning in our lives. Would you like to speak to that a little bit?
So I think there's inspiration beyond transformation and
Integration
meaning in our lives.
Yeah, integration is definitely a very fundamental part of any therapy, any ritual, any transformative experience, and I guess it's one of the hardest, because it means you need kind of a regularity, to like make sure that you have integrated what happened in the right way, and I think humans, from the biological point of view, we take time to change anything that is is going to transform ourselves, it's going to take time. So one of the things that I consider particularly on my own practice is about creating a series of different experiences, not just creating one huge experience, but looking at a program of like a year program, where you will be having particular immersive experiences, like one after the other, and they will all tied up. giving the time for like people to integrate and giving particular exercise in between them for people to integrate personally in their own time. Yeah, that would be my comment on that point.
I guess it's about creating that space. Anyone who is doing any sort of supposedly transformative experience, which really becomes only transformative when it is experienced like that, it's kind of imperative to give that time maybe for social interaction or any way in which someone can talk through that experience, because it might be that someone else will resonate with that and they can talk through that. So I think there is a responsibility from the curators to give that time. And if it's not given, there might be some issues because one might just be left in shock. Usually it's all about creating that intensity and that craziness that might arise from that. If you don't give that space, someone might not actually take what it's meant to be taken from there. So I think it's about creating that space.
Yeah, so we learned the same thing, especially from the astronauts and other people that, for example, take part in awe-inducing experiences on Earth. And there is, for the astronauts, years after, they were still internalizing. Some of them were still dreaming about it in reoccurring dreams, and it was a long process of going to events and talking about it that was helping them really make sense of something that was completely nonsensical. You know, it's a God view. If you think about it, you're sort of almost watching everything unfold beneath you, past history impact on Earth, and considering the future of what is going to come if we don't change. So all of that is held in their mind's eye. And so for them, that was many years, and they still continue to do it. So we had to think about how we were going to help people that experience the virtual reality version of it, internalize it, but also keep them contained and safe. I think we're still in the pilot, so we're going to find out, but in theory, we're going to have a short duration kind of, there will be homework where they interact with nature, for example, meditation. There will be time with a psychologist or a therapist for them to speak, perhaps even group work in a short duration kind of form. And the key thing is to help people get away from necessarily long-term therapy where they may come for years and years and years. To have that sort of shock factor of it, that is a big part of it. But yes, so there will be some internalization processes involved, but which we need to test and perfect over the years as well.
I think connectivity is something that drives all of us. And I thank you for both those questions, because those are questions that we hear from people in general. And I think when we're talking about transformation, it'd be silly for us to just focus on the self. It's collective transformation as well. But there's also more to this. You know, currently it's in its infant stages, the way we're talking about it. But the way we approach it is transactional still. So it's in silo, it's single. And it's not just about the audience transformation, it's also the transformation behind the scenes. And I think that's something that each and every one of you, through your presentations and through our journey, we've discovered, how do we bring together people from different fields? And I think if we start with that first step, we will definitely have results that bring people together, hence your question. So thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, we are gonna have to wrap it up, I'm afraid. It's only 1 minute left. So we can continue the conversations in the theater. I want to thank everyone, especially Heather, for helping us with the event and for accepting the collaboration of FLUX, and London Laser, for Central St. Martin's to hosting us, for all the students. All the students that have been helping us, especially to Martha and Aminger. We usually have a quick open mic for people to do announcements. I don't know if we have some quick announcements that someone wants to come and share about their event. They can do that now, and then we are gonna have to. Yeah, let's do the continue the conversation on the bar. I'm sorry, I know. Yeah, but we'll be available and accessible for all your questions. So I think maybe...
So thank you, Maria, and all our wonderful speakers. Big round of applause.
Yeah.